WICR Political Gridiron. We are back today on our second segment. We went over a little bit over the dormitory and just kind of general stuff about our interactions with New Rochelle and Iona College.
Yeah.
And we're going to go more onto the policing state now.
Yeah, well, you know, Pat, I think that once again, using the popular phrase, old politics is local, and I think that it's going to really show itself in this standpoint where we're having the national debate over the police force after the killings of Trayvon Martin and Eric Gardner, Michael Brown, and, you know, New Rochelle is no exception to the rule. So, Councilman, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I think that historically, especially when you look at communities of color, there has been a distrust between the police and the communities, and I think that's something that needs to be combated. It's not healthy for the police or for the community, and ultimately we all want to live in a safe society where we're able to raise kids in a safe society. So there was a flashpoint in New Rochelle about a month or two ago, and there was a video that went viral of two African American young men who had a gun pointed on them from a police officer, and the backdrop to the video that went viral was that they were having a snowball fight, and that really raised a lot of people's attention to what's going on in New Rochelle. And as a result, I felt that we needed to do something to prevent something like that or something even more serious from ever happening again. So we have a committee that's going to be planned where we're going to look at ways to modernize our police force and enhance it with better community policing methods so that we can have better trust between the police and the community. And what we have is one of the co-chairs of that committee, Dr. Catherine Lavery from this school right here. She's going to look at that with Michelle Roddy from Monroe, and it's going to be an exciting process. We're going to have 15 committed people working towards one goal. We're going to have police involved. We're going to have community members involved, and hopefully we could get some good recommendations, and hopefully New Rochelle could be a model for the nation as it relates to best community policing methods.
Yeah.
Well, Councilman, what did you guys actually do to that police officer? Was he fired or suspended or fined?
Yeah, you know, I think when you look at why he responded that way, and when you know, I heard that there was a 911 call. I actually heard the 911 call, and that's a serious thing. A lady called the police 911. Somebody has a gun, and that officer, he responded to the scene, assuming that somebody did have a gun. There was no gun found. Somebody ran. We don't know if that person had a gun or not. But I think that when you look at the video, the language that he used and telling them to get on the ground, that was a little overboard. That's not part of the protocol. So that's more of a minor issue. But other than that, I don't think that he did anything that was wrong per se.
Yeah, now there's just one issue that I have a problem with, or not a problem, that I'm concerned about, because we see on the national level where there is sort of a suspicion among minority groups of police forces that are predominantly white for the most part. And are you guys going about a proper way where you could ensure that there isn't any racial schism or racial divide? Because that ultimately is something that we have to prevent. And unfortunately, we see it happening on the national scale to a certain extent.
Yep. New Rochelle has one of the more diverse forces locally when you look at other communities, Yonkers, Mount Vernon, White Plains. So I think on that front, we do a pretty good job as far as making sure our police force represents our community. We could probably do a little bit better, but when you're hiring, you want to make sure you hire the most qualified people at the same time, where you don't have police officers who are not fit for the job or others who could be better for the job. So that's going to be a long-term process. I think when you look at hiring, one of the problems that we have is that a lot of people of color, African Americans, just don't want to be police officers. Those who ordinarily would be officers, they're discouraged because it's just a stigma attached where that's something that's not looked positively upon by a lot of people. Yeah.
I'm kind of more interested to see, I mean, as for like policing, like funding going into stuff like this more so. How does normally like funding go about for policing? Because I know there's been a stigma of debate going about how some police forces are a little bit overfunded, and they're receiving ridiculous, I mean, like tankers and whatnot. I mean, I don't know how much of this is rumor or not, but I mean, how do you plan on really like controlling, also like kind of negotiating with the police as well? I mean, seeing as much as they need and just kind of in controlling New Rochelle as a whole. I mean, how do you foresee something like this in the future?
So when you look at our budget, We have about $115 million operating budget, and $30 million of that, over 25%, is police. So between police and fire, that's 50% of our budget.
Huh.
It's really public safety, which is what the city government provides for the most part. And when you look at the recession over the last 6-7 years, we've lost about 30 officers. So budget-wise, we're actually spending less today than we were pre-recession. And one of the unfortunate circumstances of losing police officers through attrition, which we have done, is that we had to dismantle our police and community force. So we had a pact unit, police and community together, and that no longer exists. And that really allows beat officers to be on the street and have them interact with people on a daily basis, form relationships, form trust. So that went by the wayside. And actually, one of the things the committee's going to look at is ways to actually increase funding, and whether that's through grants and whether that's through general fund budgets. I think that there's a sense that our police department is underfunded to a certain degree, and we're going to look at ways to see what we can do to bring that up to speed. New Rochelle's a city, 80,000 people, and growing city, growing college, growing downtown, growing West End, and we really need our police force to keep up with those trends.
Is that including Iona College as well, that 80,000, or is that?
I believe so. I believe so, yeah.
Now, obviously, you know that a police force isn't going to solve all the problems in the community, and that we have to extend beyond that into the homes and into the school systems. Yeah. And especially with the issue of drugs and violence that we see with younger kids in high school. And is there any way that we're attacking the school systems like they do with programs like DARE, and also like criminal education, to really help influence them in how to act properly in a civil society?
So that's a good point. When I spoke about some of the cuts that were made, one of those cuts was DARE. So we did have officers in the schools, and we no longer have those. With this committee that I referred to, we're going to have 2 representatives from the New Rochelle school system. We're going to have the head of security from the school system. He's a former detective, New Rochelle Police, and we're also going to have a house principal who's in charge of the disciplinary matters. And we're going to look at it from a comprehensive approach as to ways that the school district could partner with this. School arrest diversion, it's a new concept that's being thrown around, where sometimes the police will go into school and arrest people for certain things, whether it's trespass, disorderly conduct, unlawful possession of marijuana, assault, so on and so forth. And there's a push where we don't want everybody to be arrested. We don't want everybody to be introduced to the criminal justice system, especially at a young age, because the data shows that those introductory contacts do have detrimental effects down the road. And mass incarceration is a huge problem, and that is it affects New Rochelle in the same way. So there are long-term trends and there are global issues that we're looking to tackle, but this committee is going to look at the issue of community policing and ways to kind of work around everything.
Right. Okay. No, that's really interesting. I mean, because I definitely think there's something that we need to do going into the schools, teaching kids, going about that. And I think that's really awesome when it comes to like funding. I mean, I don't know how much the city spends on basically its public education, but I mean, considering that, upwards to 50% of its policing fund goes towards, 50% of the school's fund, the city's funding goes towards policing, I think is a kind of a very nice thing to see about. I mean, considering that there are some rough areas down on North Avenue that, can possibly, have bad influences. And I think having a real strong police presence for some of these kids, learning literally what's right from wrong, and kind of that really strong distinct difference standpoint, thank you, is really a really big strong suit. And I don't know, where do you see New Rochelle in 10-20 years? Do you think it'll kind of like match up with economically wise when it comes down to policing? Do you see the city possibly spending less, not needing such a strong police presence in the not in the near future, but possibly 10-20 years from now?
Yeah, so just going back, the city of New Rochelle is a separate form of government from the city school district. So our spending is totally separate from the school district, which is more than what we spend. When you look at the property tax bills for a homeowner, the average homeowner, 2/3 of that tax bill goes to the school system, and about 1/6 goes to the city, about 1/6 goes to the county, and about 1% or so goes to the library. So the school really is the driver of property taxes, and that's where you get the bulk of your property tax spending. But as far as where we see New Rochelle going, obviously I'm one of 7 council people, and my decisions don't dictate what happens at the council level. But I think that with our plans for growth, it's a necessity for us to incorporate growth in our police departments, especially when we're looking to bring a lot of people downtown. We're looking to have a lot of mixed-use development that's residential, that's commercial, that's hotels, and safety. Public perception of safety is a must, and we really need to make sure that we don't shortchange our police and our community in that regard.
Now, Councilman, before we touch on the issue of education a little bit and to diverge from local issues onto a more national scale, obviously education is of importance to everyone. It's been the backbone of the American dream, and it's really been a driving force for people like you. Obviously, you know, you're a lawyer, and you know, when you have a college degree, you're able to succeed more often in life than others. So how are we able to go encourage education on all communities, especially minority communities, where perhaps sometimes we see the stigma where it's not really that encouraged, unfortunately.
It's not cool.
Yeah, it's not cool to be in school.
Yeah.
Not cool to be in
And
school.
also, how are we able to make it more affordable for people, not just for people that are receiving financial aid, but for other people that aren't able to qualify for financial aid? And how are we able to really, I know Barack Obama introduced the whole issue of community colleges free for everyone, but how are we able to make sure that we're able to go provide education for everyone without becoming more in debt?
Yep. So yeah, that's the main question behind everything.
Yeah.
How do you afford the services that you look to put forward? And education is such a huge component of our society, and it's broken down to different pieces. You kind of outlined your elementary education. I think that there's a big push for early intervention. I know that my children, I made sure that I sacrificed, and although I don't have as much money as I like, but I would make sure that their pre-kindergarten, their daycare, everything is taken care of at an early age, at 2-3 years old, so that they do have an advantage, they do have a head start. And unfortunately, not everybody has that. A lot of parents or single parent households don't have those luxuries, and their children just watch TV at an early age, and they don't have the same access to listening to different vocabularies. When you look at the great dividers as far as early education, it used to be based on race, but now it's more so based off of
income.
Economic. Exactly. And I read a study where people from affluent families have higher vocabularies of 3 million words at the age of 4 or 5 than those from lower income families. And early intervention, I think that what Mayor de Blasio, I don't know how many people are fans of him, but he really does have a strong push for that, and those pushes do see results, and I think that that's something that could be looked at.
Now, on the issue of Common Core, are you familiar with it?
Yeah, I'm somewhat familiar with Common Core. Yeah.
Well, where do you stand on the issue and really about having teacher control of the classroom and really, you know, having every child's progression through education and individualized?
So like the teacher's influence necessarily on the student?
Yeah, where you know everyone isn't cuckolded to the state, so to speak.
Yeah. So I have a unique view on Common Core. I think that we do need to raise our standards nationwide. So I'm with that. As for the Common Core curriculum itself, I haven't heard, well, I've heard horror stories, but when you speak to the educators and administrators, they seem to be more in favor of the actual Common Core curriculum. So I don't have any expertise as to determining whether or not it's good or bad. I know that my daughter's in kindergarten and she's going through the Common Core curriculum at this stage, and I don't see anything wrong with what she's doing at this point. And I think that she has an advantage where she's starting. I think there was a disruption among students who just were introduced to it all of a sudden, and they didn't have any preparation for how it would change things. My beef with Common Core is how the teachers are penalized. I don't agree with that whatsoever. I don't feel that grading teachers based off of test scores of students, I don't feel that that's rational, and I don't feel that really gets to the root causes of why students perform at different levels.
On a more on an international level with education, you see countries like France, Germany, Iceland, even really up there in test scores. I mean, I for one, I'm not a very good test taker, and I proved that today at 11 o'clock. But besides the fact, I mean, you look at test scores, and we kind of use that necessarily as a benchmark for, necessarily how intelligent someone is in a certain subject and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, when we look at these foreign countries, how do you kind of see? Do you think we could take something away from what they're doing, possibly, or how they're organizing their schools, or more so, what their patterns are of teaching, test taking, even if they're really seeing that as a big, like a good standard or good tape measure of how we're measuring these kids' intelligence?
Yeah. So one. What I don't like to see is when teachers just teach for the test and they focus on 2 or 3 subjects and they let everything else fall by the wayside, and they're so determined to make sure that the students get the right scores that they focus solely on what the questions to a particular test will be. But when you look at other countries, I think that the United States does have high pockets of poverty. So you look at the amount of kids and percentage of kids who go to school hungry, or you look at the single parent households or those with incarcerated parents, and those are the ancillary things that really, I believe, go towards the heart of what makes a student perform well and what makes them perform not so well. And it starts at home, and I truly believe that. And the parents need to be on board. The parents need to be taught as to what the best methods for their children to learn. The children need to be safe. They need to be free from harm. They need to be in environments that don't have violence and drugs and so on and so forth. Right. And those things that happen in the home affect what happens at school.
Exactly.
And you really can't separate the two, and we need to get to the root causes as to what's really driving those first issue problems.
Now, from a financial aspect, when we're talking about education, we see where we have younger teachers who are perhaps better teachers for the students, but they aren't getting as much money as those that have already been there, and they're tenured, let's say 30 years there. So now, how are we able to go replace those teachers, if you think that's necessary, that are just there just to teach and really not into their students, and they're taking up so much of the budget, and that's valuable. We have teachers that really do deserve those higher wages. How are we able to go combat that issue?
And I think are you more alluding towards like the tenure type teachers that get 10 years and then they kind of peak it up?
Yeah, so one, I'm not sure if I agree that younger teachers are better or worse. I don't know if there's anything to substantiate that. I think that you have good and bad teachers across the board.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
But to the fact that there are teachers with tenure, I think that just goes towards the heart of unions, and that's more of a bigger issue as to what unions are able to negotiate. I think you've seen in the Midwest.
Scott Walker.
Yeah, support for the unions are breaking down, but I think that tenure issue goes to the heart of unions and what unions are allowed to do and what they're able to come away with. And the teachers' unions are very strong, and that they've negotiated for those benefits, and it's hard to take it away when it's negotiated for.
Okay, well,
Councilman Gridiron, I wanted to say thank you so much for being our first guest here on WSCR Political Gridiron. I'm Patrick McGwire.
I'm Bill Maloney. Thanks.
I just want to thank you again. Have a good one.
All right.